MacKinnon. So she's going to be presenting on eating for your hormone type, nutrition strategies for balancing hormones naturally. So take it away, Madeline. Yes, we are recording.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be back here. I was telling some people here that I used to work at the Light Cellar, and someone was here that said for my first class, like 13 years ago. So yeah, so at the old location. Yeah, so I was the third official employee at the Light Cellar. Yeah. Yeah, so Denis came before me. Denis, I think, referred me there. So sometimes it was just me and Denis working like at the front or at the back. Yeah. I mean, it could even be 14 years. It was 2011 when I started working here. Yeah. Yeah, so now a lot has changed. I have my own private practice focusing on women's hormone balance and women's hormone health. And just last year, I published a book. It's called The Hormone Type Cookbook. So this was published we actually published it through a traditional publisher. So I was approached by a publisher who, I think they found me on Instagram, just like for social media. They were following me for a while and they wanted to do a hormone book. And we kind of were just brainstorming back and forth. And I told them this idea I had about the hormone types and actually how you can balance and how you can eat for specific hormone imbalances. So today I want to share a little bit about that. So that's why I handed out the hormone quiz. Was there anyone that didn't receive it? Yeah, so you can just come and grab it here. And this is a quiz. It's also at the front of the cookbook because you can use it as a way to navigate, because the unique thing about this cookbook is it's broken up not by like desserts, not by dinners. It's actually broken up by hormone imbalances, so common hormone imbalances. So you can focus on eat certain recipes to support different hormones. But then when it comes to the big picture, you can also just use it as a regular cookbook and cook whatever looks good in the cookbook. You're not going to imbalance your hormones if you cook one thing from the adrenal chapter or one thing from the progesterone chapter, but it really gives you a guide to really, figure things out. So so that's why we're going to go through the quiz, and I want to go through just the different parts of the quiz so we can learn a little bit about hormones, and then we'll talk about some of the food that I find really effective and some of the recipes that you can use to balance out your hormones. And if anyone has any questions throughout, you're welcome to ask them. And I just hope that, everyone, you guys can leave with some value today and some really tangible tips of what you can do for your particular situation. So I'll go through these. But hormone balance is interesting because it's definitely when you go to your doctor and you tell them that you think they have a hormone imbalance, often what are they going to say? Has anyone said that before to their doctor? Pardon? Yeah. Oh, you're just getting older. Yeah, that's normal. Often one thing I hear a lot is they'll say there's no such thing as hormone imbalances because your hormones are changing throughout your entire cycle. And I mean, it is true, some hormones do change through the cycle, but you can still have really specific real imbalances. And they're definitely not going to get if they did say you have a hormone balance, or say you had issues with your menstruation, they're not going to tell you food is going to be helpful. They're just going to, often it's like the pill, surgery, hormone replacement therapy, pain medications, antidepressants. Those are like what they're giving people. So often when I've talked to people just out on the streets about this, people I've come in contact with at parties, often people are shocked that our food can actually influence our hormones and what we eat. Like what we eat can help you have a better period or better menopause. But the beauty and the answer is that it does. And it's great because the way that I recommend eating for hormone balance is not a very restrictive way of eating at all. It's not like you're going on this low carb keto diet, you have to eliminate all these foods, or you can't even have treats here and there. you can eat a pretty non-restrictive diet and still support your hormone health. So it's very accessible, and it's also tastes really good to eat this way, and it just feels really good on the body. So I want to share some like tips with you today, and we'll get into the different hormone types as well. But the other good thing is that when it comes to hormone balance, there's actually a lot of research on specific nutrients to build different hormones. So that's why I started getting interested in hormones and food too, because I am someone I really like to like look at research and like to learn as much as I can. And I started kind of learning about, okay, what do you do to build your progesterone? It turns out that for our progesterone, which is the hormone in the second half of our cycle, it actually is, our bodies need certain nutrients like vitamin B6 to build progesterone. So all of this is not just, just random information. A lot of this actually is based on research, which is funny because of course, in modern medicine, they say, oh, your food is not going to make a difference, but then it does make a significant difference. So we'll talk about that. Yes. When I say cycle, I'm talking about just the full cycle of, you're like that you are menstruating, you're ovulating, more like, 20 to 30. It's different for everyone. Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. But all of this can apply too if you're not cycling. So a lot of this information. So how was taking the hormone quiz for anyone? Did anyone feel surprised by getting a lot of checks in any particular category? Yeah. Did anyone have one part that you saw was a lot? Oh yeah. Yeah, number 5 and 6. Yeah. Yeah, so I know we have some people joining us live. The hormone quiz. I'll have to, maybe if there's somebody afterwards who's joining me live, I mean, if you have a copy of the book, you can, this quiz is at the very front of the book, but if anyone wants also just a copy of the quiz, you can contact us and we'll make sure you can get a copy too. So some of these things are quite common. So overall, I want to share, so in the book, and I'll pass this book around too, so you guys can just flip through. I had a really good friend, she's a private chef in LA or in California. She did all my photography for me, and she's just so good. And I told her I wanted vibrant recipes, so really beautiful recipes. So the first part that I think is really important is, before we even look at like the hormone types, like figuring out what type you are, I really believe in the foundations, nutrition foundations for hormone balance that can help really anybody at any stage of life. So this is in chapter 2, but I'll give you some tips based on this chapter. But in this book, it's all about how you format your meals on a day-to-day basis. That's going to help just support overall hormone health. So essentially what I really recommend in this first part is making sure, like when it comes to hormones, what we're trying to do with our food, with our self-care, everything, we're trying to put as least stress on our body as possible. And in this day and age, like with diet culture, with people, trying to eat, there's so many diets out there. We're always switching, between keto and low carb, high carb, vegan diets. There's so many different diets. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, what we want to do is just reduce stress on our body and keep our blood sugar really stable. So for the foundations, the basics, actually, one of the first thing I talk about in this section is just the importance of like getting enough calories. So not under eating, probably one of the worst things. So you could do all the perfect foods, be adding everything in perfectly, but then if you're not meeting your calories every single day, that can put stress on your body. It can put stress on your thyroid, your adrenals. It can imbalance your hormones. So we want to, really one of the core principles of nutrition for hormone balance is just making sure you're well nourished. So I'm all about like making sure you're eating 3 meals a day, ideally, maybe some snacks. And those meals should really be very balanced out with a balance of protein, carbs, and maybe sometimes have a lower carb meal. That's okay. but like complex carbs. So I'm thinking like carbs like rice, sweet potato, even beans. They have protein, but they also have are good sources of complex carbs. And then healthy fats, of course. There's a lot of different fats. Our hormones need fat to be for building. So I love things like avocado, ghee. I consider like a nut or a seed to be a fat. So even, for example, when I make a smoothie, I'll always add like some hemp seeds or some almond butter or an avocado to my smoothie. So I have like some form of healthy fat. And what this combination is doing, fat, protein, carbs, and fiber is really important too. So getting your fiber from ideally like non-starchy vegetables, like that could be asparagus or, some spinach or lettuce, like green beans, anything like that to get that balance. But what that's doing is it's giving your body this like magical combo where it's getting nutrition in, but then it's also your blood sugar isn't spiking, which will put more stress on your hormones. But then you're getting your protein to stabilize your blood sugar, and just eating that way consistently is such a simple thing to do, but it will make a big difference. I mean, I don't think it's the best for hormones. I think post-menopause, it can be more appropriate to do it afterwards, because it can when you're cycling and you're menstruating, it can actually put more stress on the body. So if you do intermittent fast, I recommend more like a 12-hour window, like stop eating for 12 hours on, and then making sure you're eating enough within those fasts. But often it can backfire on people. They'll intermittent fast for a long time and then find over time they're just not losing weight. They're feeling lower energy. So I don't recommend it as much. It's very dependent on the situation. So that's like a little bit of the foundations I think of hormone balance. So that would be that first chapter that just teaches you how to format your meals, what different protein sources, what different types of omega-3 fats and types of fats you want to be adding into your diet, so you can get those like foundation and get that backbone. And I know, for me, I've worked with so many clients over the years, and I find a lot of people can get in this tendency where they're skipping breakfast, and then lunch is like very light. So lunch is like a salad with some tuna or a salad with some chicken. And then by dinner, they're just ravenous. And then they end up eating a large dinner, and then maybe they're snacking later on. And over time, that way of eating, they start to feel like more fatigued, low energy, just all of more symptoms in any of these categories. And it's just incredible how good you can feel when you start doing this eating routine. After 2 weeks, you might not notice the first day, but after doing it for like a week, you might be like, why do I feel so emotionally stable? Like throughout the day, I feel amazing. So that's the first category, but let's talk about the different hormone types. I will discuss each of them briefly. But did anybody have anything come up in part 1? Okay. So part 1 is our high estrogen category. High estrogen often happens when we're menstruating, and we can become very prone to high estrogen actually in perimenopause. So if anyone is still having their menstrual cycle, because as we are in that perimenopause time, like reaching menopause, sometimes your estrogen can go like up very high. Like it can almost double how it should, double or even triple sometimes how it should for each cycle. And you could also, sometimes you can have estrogen issues. You might have normal estrogen, but then you might not actually detox your estrogen properly too. So that can present as some problems. So when we're looking at high estrogen symptoms, we're looking at like definitely cyclical headaches, like noticing that you're always getting a headache around ovulation or before your period or after your period. Any forms of growths. So like it could be fibrocystic breasts. It could be like uterine fibroids, cysts. any forms of abnormal growth. Because the interesting thing with estrogen is it's an important hormone. Like we need it, especially we're producing quite a lot from our ovaries when we're menstruating. And then when we go into menopause, we'll produce more from like our fat tissue, a tiny bit from our ovaries. We don't produce quite as much, but it's really quite a necessary hormone. It's important for your brain. It's important for like lubrication, you know, even preventing wrinkle, like it actually helps the skin be more moist, and it's an important hormone. But what happens, the problem that happens with estrogen is when you just produce too much. When your body produces too much, then you can run into issues where it makes things grow that we don't want to make grow. So it could make your uterine lining too thick, giving you a heavier period. It could give you like major issues with ovarian cysts, fibroids, any of those growths. There's also the ER positive breast cancers. Estrogen doesn't necessarily cause endometriosis. If anyone has had or knows someone with endometriosis, it doesn't cause endometriosis, but if estrogen is high, or if you have a problem detoxing estrogen, then it's going to make endometriosis worse and more painful. So it can just worsen and ramp up a lot of inflammation in our bodies. So those are some signs of estrogen. And this was actually, when I wrote the book, this was one of my favorite chapters to write, because there was actually a ton of research on how to detox estrogen with food, like from really good reputable papers. And I think there's a lot of information on it more because of the breast cancer connection. So there's more research around it. So there's actually just a ton of great information on what foods you can start eating to detox your estrogen. Sometimes I really like, often when I see clients, I'll test their estrogen, because you can have there's different types of estrogen imbalances. So you might just have high estrogen. You may not detox estrogen properly. You can have phase 1 or phase 2. There's a lot of different options. But there's a lot we can do with food. You know, even if you don't do hormone testing, there's a lot you can do at the foundation.
Part of the issue is that in our modern society, estrogen.
Yeah. So it's not enough that we have our own estrogen and our own estrogen problems. We also get estrogens from our environment, like anything that is petroleum, plastic based, those are causing problems too. So some tips for estrogen, kind of one of the most basic things is actually gut health, making sure that your gut is as healthy as it can be, because phase 3 estrogen detox happens in our gut and in our intestinal tract. So we have all these bacteria in our gut, and we have this part of our gut that's solely responsible for estrogen detox, which is pretty cool. It's called the estrobolome. And if our gut becomes imbalanced and unhealthy, we'll actually, instead of getting rid of the estrogen in our body, packaging it up, it can be reabsorbed back into our bowels, and this can happen in menopause. This can happen like anytime in our lives. So I always recommend start with focusing on gut health. Fiber is important. You know, you want to be adding good quality fiber to your diet. So that's why I recommend, it's like lunch and dinner, just have a really good handful of vegetables. You might be someone that does well with adding like ground flax or sunflower seeds, or even raw carrots are really good for giving you good fibers for your estrogen. If you're having issues with your gut, like magnesium is a really good place to start. Adding some probiotics. Sometimes the gut is complicated though, and it can be helpful to go to like a naturopath or a practitioner that can help you out with your gut. If you're taking magnesium, you're doing the diet. But most of the time when clients come to me, when we just focus on changing the diet and like adding some of these things in, the gut starts to improve pretty quickly. Oh, it just helps with like constipation. Yeah, so it helps. I mean, I like magnesium glycinate. Yeah, that's my favorite, because it's also good for like menstrual, like hormones, and glycinate's really good. And then some other foods I love is like broccoli sprouts is one of the most powerful like estrogen detoxing foods. I love broccoli sprouts. They are really helpful with the detox of estrogen. So it has something called sulforaphane in them that helps. It kind of helps like just like get the estrogen, like helps drive the estrogen down the pathways to properly detox it. And that's one thing where eating broccoli sprouts, a 4th cup is going to be way more effective than any supplements. Like you aren't going to get, they have trouble recreating the same effect of broccoli sprouts than taking a supplement. Yeah, like a 1/4 cup, like just a small handful. You know, you don't have to eat massive amounts. You can grow your own. Sometimes they have them at the health food store. You can look for like broccoli sprout powder, but it's never going to be the same. So those are some things that I really like. You might have first, I think the beet berry smoothie is one of my favorite recipes for estrogen detox because it has beets, which help with phase 2 detox, and fibers, and what else? We have orange peel, which also helps with estrogen detox. I could do a full class on estrogen detox though, so I should probably move to the next category, but there's just so much that you can do. Does anyone have anything come up in part 2? This part is the low estrogen. Yeah, this part is like the low estrogen chapter. So this part is the chapter, if you have low estrogen, it's very common, of course, in menopause when you stop menstruating, but you can actually have low estrogen at many different times too. I've tested multiple of my younger clients' hormones and they've also had lower estrogen. So these are going to give you a lot of your common like menopause type symptoms, you know, like brain fog, hot flashes, yeah, night sweats, frequent UTIs, not having a period. Amenorrhea would be a sign that your estrogen is low if you're just not having your period, or like having a very light period, like less than a couple teaspoons. Yeah, just trouble staying or falling asleep. Those are just common signs that you're in a low estrogen state. And when it comes to food and nutrition, if you are menstruating, so if you still have your cycle, there are foods you can use to like actually boost up your estrogen. So things like foods that are rich in vitamin E especially are excellent. So like I actually butternut squash, the squashes are amazing. Sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, like actually beef tallow, like there's a fish, those things, the vitamin E is really good. If you are in menopause, you know, I don't believe we're not going to artificially boost our estrogen because that's just the state, our hormonal state in our body. When we are in menopause, we want to do things to support our body in that low estrogen state. So what that means, it could mean like making sure that you are having things to support your bone health, because your bone density goes down significantly. Like I think you lose like 15% of your bone mass within the first like couple of years of menopause. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember the exact fact, but it's something around there. So we want to support our body naturally because it is a natural state to be in that low estrogen, but we want to support our body to get those nutrients to fill in what estrogen used to do, because estrogen was our bodies used estrogen to keep our bones healthy. And then all of a sudden you have none. That means that you really need the nutrients to fill that in. So there is some things. So that chapter really covers what you can do to boost up your estrogen if you're menstruating, but then what you can do to support your low estrogen when you are in menopause. So I like that chapter. For example, there's this grain-free sunflower porridge. So this is like a porridge that's really high in vitamin E because it has sunflower seeds in it. And it's paleo, and it really doesn't spike the blood sugar. It will give you lots of like healthy fats in there. So, okay. I mean, I think either one is fine. I like roasted sometimes. Yeah, the best is sprouted, soaked soaked and sprouted or soaked and dehydrated is the best. And then roasted and raw are like, they're still good. You're still going to get the nutrients. So that's the part. So that's like a whole chapter on what you can do to support low estrogen. Part 3, anybody have any part 3s coming up? Yeah, so part 3, that's the thyroid section.
Lower.
That would be low thyroid. I didn't cover high thyroid in the book. We just covered low thyroid. So this is all, and you know, with thyroid, you might know that you have a thyroid issue, but often people can have something called subclinical hypothyroid, where it's like you're just falling through the cracks of the medical system, where maybe your numbers are in the normal range, but they're not in the optimal range. And you might have all the symptoms of low thyroid. So if anyone has a lot of these checked off and they've been told everything is normal, it's helpful to get a second opinion. Actually, you can look up the numbers for optimal thyroid range and see if your numbers are in the optimal thyroid range. And thyroid is another thing though. Food is amazing. There's tons of research on what we can do, certain nutrients that can help support our thyroid. Let me find this chapter here, but like there's a whole list. Like our body needs, for example, we need selenium. Our thyroid needs, of course, iodine to function. So if we're deficient in iodine, we can run into issues. We need actually a lot of nutrients to just convert our inactive thyroid hormone into our active thyroid hormone. So we need things like selenium, zinc. I think we need iron. So if you're low in iron, it could impact your thyroid too. Magnesium, vitamin A, vitamin D, selenium. We need these things for our thyroid. So it's important that if you are having some of those symptoms coming up, or if you're even in a vulnerable time, for example, I know for me, like in postpartum, I need to make sure I'm taking care of my thyroid, because when your hormones shift after baby, you can actually develop sometimes temporary Hashimoto's and temporary thyroid issues. The same thing can go in perimenopause. When your hormones start fluctuating, then your thyroid can start to become more vulnerable to go out of balance too. Or even when you're going through a time of stress. So we want to really focus on supporting our thyroid like through those times. So you might not have a thyroid issue, but you can still make all the recipes from this chapter. Or if you suspect you have one, there's a lot you can do. So we have like the thyroid healing, like masala chai is really good if you want like a drink that has ginger and some herbs like ashwagandha to help boost your thyroid. Even actually some foods I really love for thyroid are like the shellfish. So things like mussels, clams, they are amazing for thyroid because they have all of the nutrients that you need for thyroid. They have zinc, they have iron, they have selenium, and they have vitamin A. So they're like these little thyroid supportive superfoods. I mean, shrimp is not quite as many nutrients. Oh, pardon? What you said, the shrimp? Yeah, shrimp is not quite as much as the mussels. Yeah, the mussels and the clams and the oysters, those are like the thyroid superfoods. Here, you can get them here. It's just the collagen protein powder. Yeah. Yeah, they're very accessible now. They have them at most like supplement departments, wherever you go. The collagen is good for the gut healing because we want to support healthy gut when it comes to thyroid. Yeah, that probably is. When I say collagen peptides, it's the one that doesn't create a gel when you add. So there's gelatin, which will make a gel consistency, but the peptides, you can just blend it into drinks and they don't gel up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk part 4. Anyone come up with any part 4 things coming up? Yeah. So part 4, this is low progesterone. So if you are postmenopause, you will be in that lower progesterone state, but often your body's kind of adjusted to it by producing progesterone from your adrenals instead of your ovaries. But progesterone is low progesterone is a really common hormone imbalance that can happen in perimenopause, before. It's really common in cases of infertility. So as I was mentioning here, like frequent miscarriages, unexplained infertility, but you might also just have a cycle that's really wonky. So you may have a menstrual cycle where you're getting a lot of PMS anxiety, fibroids, irregular cycles, mood swings, night sweats, like in the second half of your cycle. And it's really common to have low progesterone if you're in those like mid to late 40s, but even anytime after 35, your hormones can start to decrease, your progesterone.
High estrogen, low progesterone.
Yeah, you can have multiple. So you could, if you have high estrogen and low progesterone, you're gonna feel even worse often because that's like, if you have both of those things off, you're just not gonna, it's the extremes on both sides. But some people have normal progesterone, high estrogen. Some people have normal estrogen, low progesterone. So it really depends. Well, the best thing to know for sure is actually testing. You're always like running hormone testing to see. Blood test is a good option for the most accurate results, and especially when it comes to estrogen. I like urine testing. So actually going to a naturopath or going to a practitioner and getting like a dried urine test for looking at your hormones is the best. Yeah, yes, it's dried urine test. There's a company called the Dutch test. So they're going to give you a good markup, like look at all of them. So it's always good if these symptoms are really impacting the quality of your life. It's really important to start with the quiz, start with the symptoms, and then look at getting some further testing done. So then you can have more of a honed in response, honed in approach. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm finding also some of these symptoms that come up, like the mood swings. I don't have as many, but like what they call comorbidity is
Mm-hmm.
and some of these symptoms, especially with women with ADHD, it increases these symptoms.
Yes. It can overlap. Yeah. Yeah. I know for hormones, like if you have ADHD plus perimenopause, I have a friend that has that and she's going through a rough time because it concentrates when you have
the brain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can make things a lot worse. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I do think, yeah, you have to just advocate with the doctor, but sometimes it is helpful even here, like if you can go to a naturopath, a lot of naturopaths will actually do blood tests too. You can actually get blood tests done through a naturopath and they have access to a lot of the testing still through Alberta Health. So then they'll actually know what to look for, because you could come up with normal estrogen and progesterone on the tests, but it might, for example, your estrogen might be normal, but your problem could actually be from estrogen detox. And that's why you want to do more of like a urine test and then have someone that can look at it and understand and make sure you're doing it at the right time. And so it is good to get support with the testing. Mm-hmm.
I used to think it's, but I just don't need as much sleep.
Yeah.
Especially working nights.
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm just wide awake and ready to go.
Yeah.
And so I try to not go to bed at 2, because your healing phases are before that. So I go to bed earlier and then wake up at 3, like, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can be, the lack of sleep can definitely be low estrogen. But even over time, I think as you age, you'll make less melatonin over time as you age. So just over time, sleep quality does get impacted, but we can still try and optimize as much as you can. So there's a lot of reasons.
The topic I want to make about the testing.
Mm-hmm.
If I suggest if you can go to a naturopath, but even like with the conventional doctors, there's such a range in what they consider normal.
Yes.
The guy's gone, having some issues with perimenopause, and they did testing for anemia, and they said, oh, you need to be within 10 to 120 parts. There's a big gap between 10 and 20. And if you're just kind of sort of on the edge, they go, oh, you're normal.
Yeah, then they'll think is normal, and everything works holistically together. So sometimes you might have a couple that are just on the edge, and then they'll say that's normal, but then you want to have someone that's going to look at everything together. Yeah. So I think it's helpful. Okay, so part 5, it's amazing how the time goes by today, but part 5 is the adrenals. So this is if you're noticing a lot of these coming up, this is the adrenal section. When it comes, so it could be either. So you could have low cortisol, or you could have high cortisol, or you can have flipped cortisol where your cortisol is low when it should be high, and then high when it should be low. So there's multiple different like cortisol imbalances you're having. And that can be helpful sometimes to do some testing, but overall just following the nutrition tips in this chapter. So I think this is the last chapter of the book. So following just some of those nutrition tips is actually a great way to start supporting your adrenals. And so a couple of recipes I want to highlight is like the adrenal cocktail is an amazing recipe you can make. You can simplify it too. Sometimes I'll just make an adrenal cocktail with a little bit of salt, a little bit of cream of tartar because it has potassium in it, and then some of the camu berry powder. That's a natural vitamin C powder that you can get. My husband's been having some adrenal issues, and like we'll make 3 of those a day, and I'll just give them to him through the day. He notices a huge difference in his energy when he's supporting the adrenals, because the adrenals are really, the adrenals really need salt. They need vitamin C. There's a lot of nutrients that our adrenals need to run properly too. But this adrenal cocktail is like a great, like really delicious recipe you can make for yourself and have it in the afternoon or the mid-morning. And also if you're dealing with adrenal burnout, one of the most important things I recommend is making sure the meals you're cooking are easy. So in this chapter, I really made sure we had some like meals that could just be made really easily. Like there's the no blend almond bliss balls, where you're just like, it's a 1 bowl recipe where you're putting almond butter and like some ingredients and you're just stirring it up, and then you have some snacks for the week. Like freezer recipes are excellent. So just making some things that can make sure you're eating well when you're experiencing like lower energy. So the adrenal chapter is great too, because it's just giving you some really easy recipes that is going to help like boost your energy. And it goes into the different like types of adrenal burnout as well. So adrenals I won't cover too much on adrenals, but if anyone has any questions after the class, you can let me know. Part 6, this one is low testosterone. So we often think of testosterone for men, but females, we need testosterone too. It's actually quite important, of course, libido, but it's also important for just helping you make sure you have maintained muscle mass. So if you notice it's hard to like put on muscle as much as you used to, concentration, if you have low testosterone, it could even cause thinning hair. It's interesting, if you have high testosterone, you could have thinning hair, and if you have low testosterone, it could cause thinning hair. So you want to be in that balance. It can impact bone density. It can be common to get a bit of a lag of testosterone as we reach 50, but it can often come back up after you go through perimenopause and menopause. So there is hope. You don't have to be in a low testosterone state. There's a lot of great foods for supporting testosterone. One thing I want to highlight is actually just like fish oil and seafood has been shown in research to help support testosterone levels, and zinc. So any foods that are rich in zinc So things like, you know, what is like the shellfish, of course. Red meat is a really good form of bioavailable zinc. And in plant-based zinc would be pumpkin seeds, or seaweeds are actually quite a good form of zinc as well. But we have some good, like really good recipes in this chapter too, that like a good smoothie recipe, and that's really good for boosting testosterone, you know, that can be had by men or women. And some like the pumpkin seed pesto, I think I was mentioning to someone that's like one of my favorite recipes in the book. This is a pesto made with pumpkin seeds, so you're going to get your zinc. That's delicious. So there's a lot of delicious recipes, you know, and even if you don't have low testosterone, I recommend make the recipes from this book. And then we're into, yeah, so that's like, there's a lot we can do for testosterone. Part 7, so this is the last part. This part is called high androgen hormones. So having high testosterone falls under this category, but there's other hormones like DHT and aldosterone that can be high as well. And this part 7, androgen hormones are considered male sex hormones. We call them male sex hormones, but females also make them, just not in certain high amounts. And this hormone imbalance happens when the body produces too many of these androgens. This is really common in cases of polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is quite common. I think 1 in 10 women have polycystic ovarian syndrome. But there's actually, the best way to address polycystic ovarian syndrome is diet. There's many people who've reversed that condition just from improving their diet. But you can have, so this is common in the menstruating years, but you also can start to develop high androgens in menopause too, especially if you are having issues with insulin resistance. So if you're not like, if your blood sugar is not balanced and your body's not processing insulin properly, then that's when, you know, you may notice like neck hair, like, you know, it's kind of like high androgens it will give you the hair in places you don't want it. And then it will make you have thinning hair where you do want it. It's a very unfair thing, but it can create, it's like chest hair, neck hair, like any of those. That's a common sign. Oily skin. If you are in your menstruating years, you might notice you're having periods or actually menstrual cycles. So the full cycle length that are longer than 35 days, or just like pretty irregular, or sometimes maybe your period only happens every 60 days. Excess belly fat, acne is a big one. Oily, yeah, I mentioned oily skin. So the androgen chapter can be really helpful for you. And then a great thing in this book is every chapter has a little description at the beginning. Somebody said this is almost like, this book is kind of like a textbook, but then there's recipes in it.
These are 5 in that.
Yeah.
Is that just like?
Yeah, if you're getting a 5, I would definitely look into this category too. I think if you have more than 3 in any of these parts, I would look into the chapter for sure. Yeah, this chapter 7, the high androgen, it's all about balancing blood sugar, actually, because one of the best ways to balance out high androgen symptoms is to balance blood sugar. So I have this tonic for the apple cider vinegar morning drink that you can take that will help to level out and balance your blood sugar. There's some snacks, some smoothies. I like this chia breakfast bowl that's really delicious, that has lots of fiber. And then there's different, of course, actually zinc helps as well. Different minerals are really helpful, like magnesium is really effective too. So there's a lot of good like high protein recipes. This is the avocado freezer fudge, or not freezer fudge, freezer bar. So it's like an ice cream bar that's made with blended avocado. And then you can make batches and then you don't have to eat it all. Avocado will go bad pretty fast if you blend it, but if it's in the freezer, then you'll have like these little bars, like they're key lime pie bars. They're delicious. So there's lots of good recipes there. But ultimately, yeah, no matter what hormone type you are, just a lot of people have found a lot of success just in starting to make recipes. You know, I've had someone reached out to me who said that this book actually helped her get pregnant. She was struggling with infertility, and she like really attests that making these recipes from the book like helped her get pregnant. And, you know, other people just going through, you know, really bad menstrual cycles or perimenopause, or just giving this book like to your daughter to start learning about her hormones and understanding. So you can use, this book is very helpful for people at many different stages of life. So you can kind of follow along as a cookbook, or you can do the approach of the hormone quiz, can be very helpful. Can I take any questions from anybody? Yes.
Special advice for
Yeah, so special advice for hysterectomy, like so often, you know, even if you've had your, would it be able the ovaries removed as well? Yeah, so it would probably be, the good thing is you have ovaries, so they're producing your estrogen and your progesterone, but still just from having the hysterectomy, your body can like go like produce lower hormones. So you might want to really make sure you're following that advice in that low estrogen chapter of like already being proactive at supporting like your bone health, and really balancing your blood sugar to prevent insulin resistance, and like lots of antioxidant rich foods too, just to help like after going through like that process of like, even if it's been a while, like any sort of colorful foods in the diet, like turmeric, berries, like those foods to lower the inflammation is going to be helpful too. Yeah, but sometimes it can be tricky because you may not know like where you're at, right, with the hormones. So sometimes, yeah, doing testing can be helpful too, so you can know, am I high estrogen still? Am I low estrogen? Yeah. Yeah.
Children have hormone imbalances also.
I mean, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about that. I mean, definitely teens are prone to hormone imbalances. Yeah, and I think now like boys too can often be exposed to a lot of estrogen, which can cause issues too. Yeah, but that's a good question.
Alrighty, well, we'll wrap up this talk here, but you can still, I think, connect with Madeline.
Yeah.
She'll be around in the shop for any questions and signing her books. And, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So much.
Thank you guys.